this video is going to introduce some new vocab and some new notes based on exponential growth. Okay, so you should have a piece of paper out. You should write your name at the top of the paper. And you're not going to have to copy everything you see down. I'm going to specifically tell you what to copy. So for example, you don't have to copy everything you see on this first page, but what you should do is you should copy down the equation that we're evaluating, and you should copy down these 4 values of x, just like you see here. Okay, you do not have to copy this paragraph. Okay, so take a minute and pause the video and just write down this equation and the 4 values below it. Now, this is something we've done already, so this is just a warm-up problem. But if you forgot how to do it, we're evaluating for each value of x, so that means any x value you're going to plug in for x. So if my function is, let's use a different color, 3 times 2 to the x power, well, they want me to evaluate at 0. So what that's going to look like is 3 times 2 to the 0 power. And if you are good with exponents, or if you put that into the calculator exactly how you see it, then you are going to get, well, 3 times 2 to the 0 is just 3. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is to do the other 3 problems here, plugging in each of those numbers for x. Okay, so pause the video and do that. You can write it into your notes. And then I'm going to move on to the next page and introduce you some new notes. And I will post the answers at a later date, maybe after the assignment's already due, just so I give everyone a chance to try it out before I give the answers. Okay, so now some quick notes. This is going to give us a little bit of vocab. It's going to help us understand the equation better. The notes part, I do want you guys to copy. You are not going to have to copy the example. Okay, you can just watch me go through the example. But the notes you do actually have to have. So take a second and pause and copy this stuff down. And I'm going to start actually filling in a couple of things that you should also fill in. So if you take a look at this first arrow right here, pointing to the first number in your equation, remember this is going to be an actual number when you're dealing with specific examples, but right now we're just going to call it A. So A represents the Y-intercept. Okay, and if you remember from different types of equations we've done, the Y-intercept is also known as the starting value. Okay, so if we're talking about exponential growth, that could mean, well, if your situation is talking about how quickly a rumor spreads, then the starting value, the number that goes where A is, would be the number of people who knew the rumor on the first day. Okay, that's what you start with. Okay, and now the B, let's look at the next arrow. The number inside the parentheses is known as the growth factor. Okay, the growth factor. And that means how it's growing, like how quickly it's growing or how quickly it's decreasing. Okay, so if this number is bigger than 1, then the function will increase. If this number is a fraction or decimal, less than 1, then the function will decrease. Okay, so take a second and make sure you have these notes down, okay, because you're going to need these moving forward. And so if you're not done, just pause the video, because now I'm going to move on and do an example so we understand what this equation really means. So if you look at example 1, It says, find the y-intercept and growth factor of the following functions. Also tell whether it is increasing or decreasing. So the y-intercept, if you look at the notes that we just copied down, the y-intercept is the number in front of the parentheses, okay? So if we look at this first problem right here, the number in front of the parentheses is 5. So we're going to say that the y-intercept is 5. And then what's the growth factor? Well, the growth factor is right here. So the growth factor, I'm going to say GF for growth factor, is 0.75. And now you'll notice that 0.75 is a number that is a decimal less than 1. So what does that mean? Does that mean our function is going to increase or decrease? Well, if you look back at our notes, decimal less than 1 means the function is going to decrease. Okay, so that's what it wants us to do for this example. So number 2, very similar. What is our y-intercept, or our starting value? Well, our starting value, y-intercept, is 4. And our growth factor is 3/2. Now, you might be tempted to say that this decreases because 3/2 is a fraction. Remember, I said fraction less than 1. Okay, 3/2, if you put 3 divided by 2 in your calculator, 1.5. Okay, so that is bigger than 1. So even though it's a fraction, it's bigger than 1. That means this function is increasing. Okay, so like I said, you didn't have to copy this problem down. What I want you to do for this next part is only copy down what I'm about to highlight. Okay, so copy down the word practice, and then copy these 4 problems down. You do not have to copy the paragraph, just the problems. Okay, A, B, C, and D. And I want you guys, just like we did in the example 1, to find the y-intercept of each of these problems, find the growth factor, and tell whether it's increasing or decreasing. Okay? Like I said before, I will post the answers at a later date. I want to give you guys a chance to try this out. All right, now, obviously, you guys can't really graph right now because we don't have graph paper that I can give you all. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip the graphs for now. Hopefully, if I can figure something out, we'll go back to it later. And the last thing I need you guys to try out is this matching section. So again, this you can copy, and I'll show you how it works. So if you look at number 1, all of your choices are on the right side, okay? So we have the 3, and that is in our y-intercept spot. So we know 3 is our y-intercept. We know that our growth factor is 1/2. And since 1/2 is less than 1, this is a decreasing function, okay? So let's find an answer that has a y-intercept of 3 and a growth factor of 1/2. Okay, do you see it? Well, it's not A, it's not B. Well, look at C, y-intercept 3, growth factor 1/2. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw an arrow from number 1 to choice C. Okay, and that's what I want you guys to do for the rest of these problems. All right, so to sum up, on your paper, you should have your warm-up. You should have this note section. And you should have these 2 practice problems. Okay, you should have the y-intercept and growth factor practice problems, and you should have the matching section.